The cold was a thief. It stole the feeling from Alara Vance's fingers as she fumbled with the keys to her apartment. It stole the warmth from the thin fabric of her coat, a coat she'd found at a thrift store 2 winters ago. It tried to steal the hope from her heart, but Alara wouldn't let it. Not yet. The lock finally clicked, a small, sad sound in the echoing hallway of the rundown building. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, the scent of dust and old worries greeting her like a familiar, unwelcome friend. Home. The word felt too big, too warm for this small, cramped space. A single room served as her kitchen, her living room, her world. A threadbare sofa sagged in the corner, its springs groaning in protest whenever she sat. A small, scarred table stood against the wall, holding a stack of envelopes. Bills, red ink screamed from their little plastic windows. Final notice. Past due. She averted her eyes. Looking at them wouldn't make the numbers smaller. It wouldn't put money in her empty bank account. It wouldn't fix the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. She was tired. The kind of tired that went bone deep. A weariness that sleep couldn't cure. She had just finished a 10-hour shift cleaning offices downtown, her second job. Her first job, waitressing at the Gilded Spoon, started in less than an hour. Just enough time to check on her mother, change into her uniform, and walk the 27 blocks to the restaurant. Her car had broken down last month. The repair cost was a joke, a cruel laugh from a universe that seemed to find her struggle amusing. So she walked, everywhere, in the biting November wind, in the rain, in the dark. She walked. She moved to the tiny alcove that passed for a bedroom, separated from the main room by a faded floral sheet tacked to the ceiling. Her mother was sleeping. The soft, shallow rhythm of her breathing was the most precious sound in Alara's world. Maria Vance's face, even in sleep, was etched with pain. The illness had been relentless, chipping away at the vibrant, laughing woman Alara remembered from her childhood. Now she was frail, a delicate bird with clipped wings. The medicine helped, but it was expensive. Each prescription bottle on the nightstand represented hours of scrubbing floors, of carrying heavy trays, of smiling at customers who looked right through her. Alara gently pulled the thin blanket higher over her mother's shoulders. "I'm home, Mama," she whispered, though her mother couldn't hear. "I'll be back late." Her mother stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips. Alara's heart clenched. She wanted to give her mother the world, a warm house, a soft bed, doctors who didn't rush, food that wasn't from a can. Instead, all she could offer was this struggle, this constant grinding poverty. She backed out of the room, her eyes stinging. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. They solved nothing. She moved to the kitchen area, her gaze falling on the bare shelves of her pantry. 1 can of soup, chicken noodle, her last one. Her stomach growled, a hollow, aching sound. This was supposed to be her dinner, her only meal for the day. But then she remembered her grandmother's voice, a warm echo from a happier time. "Even when you have only a crumb, Alara girl," she used to say, her hands kneading dough on a flour-dusted table. "You break it in half. 1 half for you, 1 for your neighbor. Kindness is the only bread that feeds 2 souls at once." Her neighbor, Mr. Henderson in 2B, was older, a widower who rarely left his apartment. His Social Security check was often late. She knew he was probably hungrier than she was. She picked up the can. It felt heavy in her hand. Heavy with her hunger, with her choice. She could eat it. No one would know. Mr. Henderson wouldn't know what he was missing, but she would. She would know she had chosen herself over her grandmother's lesson. She took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. She found a small pot, opened the can, and heated the soup on the sputtering electric stove. She poured it into a chipped ceramic bowl, found the one clean spoon she owned, and placed it on a small tray. She wouldn't break it in half. She would give him all of it. She would drink some water. She would be fine. She knocked softly on the door of 2B. It creaked open, and Mr. Henderson's wrinkled face appeared in the crack. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Ilara," he rasped, his voice thin as paper. "I made some soup, Mr. Henderson," she said, her smile feeling tight on her face. "I thought you might like some." He took the tray, his hands trembling slightly. "Oh, child, you shouldn't have." His eyes were glassy with unshed tears. "You are a gift, a true gift." "Enjoy it," she said softly. She walked back to her apartment, the emptiness in her stomach now joined by a quiet warmth in her chest. Grandma was right. It did feed two souls. She quickly changed into her work uniform, a crisp white shirt, a black skirt, and an apron. The clothes were clean but worn thin at the elbows and hem. She looked at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. Tired eyes stared back at her, but they were clear. They held no shame. She pulled on her worn-out sneakers, the soles peeling away at the sides. She grabbed her keys and her empty purse. Time to go. Time to walk. Time to smile and serve people who would spend more on a bottle of wine than she made in a week. The wind outside was even more brutal than before. It whipped down the city canyons, a howling beast of glass and steel. Each gust felt like a physical blow, pushing her back, daring her to give up. But Ilara just leaned into it, her head down, one foot in front of the other. The gilded spoon was an island of light and warmth in the cold, dark city. Golden light spilled from its large windows, illuminating laughing faces and tables laden with food. It was another world, a world she served, but could never join. She slipped in through the employee entrance in the back alley, the smell of garlic and roasting meat replacing the scent of exhaust fumes. "You're almost late, Vance," a sharp voice cut through the kitchen clatter. It was Chloe, another waitress. Her lips were pursed in a permanent state of disapproval. "Sorry," Ilara mumbled, tying on her apron. "I was saving the world," Chloe finished, rolling her eyes. "Just get your tables ready. Sterling is in a mood tonight." Richard Sterling, the manager, a man whose smile was as artificial as the silk plants in the lobby. He ran the Gilded Spoon with an iron fist and a condescending sneer, especially for staff he deemed beneath him, which, in his eyes, was everyone. Ilara pasted on her work smile and entered the dining room. It was a performance. Every night, she played the part of the cheerful, efficient waitress. Good evening. May I take your order?" "Right away, sir." "Is everything to your satisfaction?" For the next few hours, she was a ghost. A pair of hands delivering food, refilling glasses, clearing plates. She moved through the maze of tables, her feet aching, her stomach a hollow drum. She watched people eat. She watched them laugh over plates of seared scallops and filet mignon. She watched them leave half-eaten desserts that cost more than her daily wage. It was a special kind of torture. During a brief lull, she stood near the front window, looking out at the street. And that's when she saw him. He was huddled in the doorway of the closed shop across the street, trying to escape the wind. His clothes were ragged, his beard long and matted. He clutched a battered instrument case to his chest, as if it were his only friend in the world. A homeless man. just another shadow in the city's forgotten corners. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of, what was it? Not despair, not anger. It was a quiet dignity, a deep, profound sadness. As she watched, the man shivered, a violent, full-body tremor. He looked over at the restaurant, his gaze lingering on the plates of food visible through the window. Ilara's heart ached. She knew that look. She knew that hunger. She thought of the soup she'd given to Mr. Henderson. She had nothing left to give. Nothing. Then she remembered the staff meal. Once a shift, they were allowed one plate of food from a limited menu in the kitchen. She hadn't eaten hers yet. She was saving it for after her shift, to take home to her mother. It wasn't much, just some pasta and a bread roll, but it was something. It was everything. She looked at the man again. He had his head bowed now, defeated by the cold. She thought of her grandmother. Kindness is the only bread that feeds two souls. She made a decision. She turned to go to the kitchen, but a hand grabbed her arm. It was Chloe. "Oh, don't even think about it," Chloe hissed, her eyes darting towards the man outside. "He's hungry," Ilara said simply. "He's a bum," Chloe countered. "And Sterling will fire you on the spot if you bring him near this place. Is it worth your job, Ilara? Is he worth it? Have you ever had to choose between your conscience and your survival? It is a terrible, impossible choice." Ilara looked at her coworker. "People like that are trouble," Chloe warned. "They're lazy, they're dangerous. Just leave him alone. It's not your problem." Ilara pulled her arm away gently. "Maybe that's the problem," she said softly. "Everyone thinks it's not their problem." She walked into the kitchen, her heart pounding. She was afraid, terrified. This job was her lifeline. Losing it would mean eviction. It would mean no medicine for her mother. It would mean ruin. But the image of the man shivering in the cold was burned into her mind. She asked the cook for her staff meal, putting it in a takeout container. Her hands trembled as she put the lid on. This was crazy. This was reckless. She slipped out the back door and circled around to the front of the restaurant. The wind hit her again, and she gasped. She approached the man slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small. He looked up, his eyes a startlingly clear blue in his weathered face. They held no suspicion, only a deep weariness. I brought you something to eat," she said, holding out the container. He stared at it for a long moment as if he couldn't believe it was real. Then he looked up at her, and his gaze was so intense it made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "But I cannot take charity." Ilara was taken aback. "It's not charity," she insisted. "It's a gift." "I am a musician," the man said, patting the worn case beside him. "I earn my meals. Allow me to play one song for you, for the food." He wanted to play? Here? On the street? "You don't have to do that," she said quickly. "Please, just take it." "One song," he insisted, his voice gentle but firm. "It is a matter of pride." Ilara looked at the restaurant behind her, then back at the man. An idea, wild and dangerous, sparked in her mind. It was too cold out here. He couldn't play in this wind. His fingers would be too stiff. "Come inside," she heard herself say. The words were out before she could stop them. The man's eyes widened. "Inside? They will not allow it." "Just for a few minutes," she urged, her heart hammering against her ribs. "In the entryway. It's warm there. You can play your song, and then you can have the meal." She was risking everything. Her job, her home, her mother's care, all for a stranger, all for one song. He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. He struggled to his feet, his joints stiff from the cold. He followed her to the grand entrance of the Gilded Spoon. She held the heavy glass door open for him, and he stepped inside, bringing a gust of cold air and the scent of the street with him. The hostess at the front desk looked up, her painted smile freezing on her face. Her eyes widened in alarm. "Ilara, what are you doing?" She whispered frantically. "It's okay, Susan," Ilara said, trying to sound confident. "He's just going to play one song." The man settled himself on a small bench in the foyer, away from the main dining area. He placed his case on his lap and began to undo the rusty latches. The quiet murmur of the restaurant continued, oblivious. For a moment, Ilara thought she might have gotten away with it, and then she heard the voice. "What is the meaning of this?" The voice was cold, sharp, dripping with contempt. Richard Sterling. He strode towards them from the dining room, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. His face was a mask of fury. His eyes, small and hard, were fixed on the homeless man. "What is this filth doing in my establishment?" he demanded, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the nearby tables. Diners began to turn their heads. Phones started to emerge from pockets and purses. "Mr. Sterling, I can explain," Ilara began, her voice trembling. "Explain?" he sneered, his gaze shifting to her. "Explain what? That you are letting vagrants and degenerates wander into my five-star restaurant? Are you insane?" "He was cold," Ilara said, her voice barely a whisper. "He just wanted to play one song for some food." Sterling let out a short, barking laugh. It was a sound devoid of any humor. "A song?" he mocked, his voice now loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "We are not a soup kitchen. We are not a shelter. This is a place of class, of sophistication, something you clearly know nothing about." He pointed a manicured finger at the man. "Get out! Now! Before I call the police and have you thrown in a cell where you belong!" The man did not flinch. He simply continued to slowly unlatch his case, his blue eyes fixed on Sterling with an unnerving calm. This infuriated Sterling even more. He turned his venom back on Ilara. "And you," he spat, his face inches from hers. "You are finished. Fired. Do you understand me? Get your things and get out of my sight." Ilara felt the floor drop out from under her. Fired. The word echoed in the sudden silence of the restaurant. Every eye was on her. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their morbid curiosity. She was the evening's entertainment. "But I need this job," she pleaded, the desperation raw in her voice. "You should have thought of that before you decided to invite the sewer into my dining room," Sterling said, his voice dripping with malice. He wasn't done. He wanted to humiliate her completely. He pointed to a tiny, imaginary scuff mark on the pristine marble floor. "Before you go," he said, a cruel smile twisting his lips, "you missed a spot. Your last official duty will be to clean it." He snapped his fingers at a busboy. "Bring me a rag and a bucket." The busboy, a young man named Leo, looked horrified. He hesitated. "Now!" Sterling roared. Leo scurried away, returning a moment later with a wet rag. Sterling took it and threw it on the floor at Ilara's feet. "On your knees," he commanded. "Where you belong. Clean it." The humiliation was a physical thing. It washed over her in a hot, sickening wave. Her vision blurred with tears. The faces of the diners swam before her. Some looked away, ashamed. Others watched with rapt attention, their phones held up, recording her degradation. No one spoke up. No one moved to help her. She was utterly, completely alone. "I said, on your knees," Sterling repeated, his voice booming. Slowly, her body shaking, Ilara began to sink to the floor. Her spirit felt like it was breaking into a million pieces. This was it. This was the end of everything. And then, a new sound cut through the silence. It was not Sterling's voice. It was the sound of the latches on the instrument case finally springing open. Click, click. That will be quite enough. The voice was quiet, but it carried an impossible weight, an undeniable authority. It was the homeless man. He had risen to his feet, and he was no longer stooped or shivering. He stood tall, his posture ramrod straight. The ragged coat seemed to hang differently on his frame, like a disguise he had just shrugged off. His clear blue eyes were now hard as diamonds, and they were fixed on Richard Sterling. Sterling scoffed. "And who do you think you are to tell me what to do? You worthless piece of trash." The man did not answer. Instead, he lifted the lid of his case. Everyone in the restaurant craned their necks, expecting to see a cheap, beat-up guitar. But it was not a guitar. Nestled in the worn velvet lining was a violin. It was not just any violin. It was a masterpiece. The wood glowed with a deep, rich luster, the color of dark honey. It looked ancient, priceless. A stunned silence fell over the room. The man lifted the instrument from its case with hands that were suddenly steady and sure. He tucked it under his chin. His entire demeanor had transformed. The homeless man was gone. In his place stood someone else entirely. Someone powerful. "Sterling," the man said, his voice now a clear, resonant baritone that filled the foyer. "You have been manager of this particular location for 3 years, have you not?" Sterling was momentarily speechless, confused by the sudden shift in dynamics. How do you know my name?" he stammered. "I know a great many things about you," the man said calmly. "I know you've been skimming from the restaurant's profits for the last 18 months. I know you falsify inventory reports. I know you bully your staff and treat them like your personal servants." Sterling's face, which had been red with anger, was now rapidly draining of all color. It turned a pasty, sickly white. Who are you?" he whispered, a tremor of fear in his voice. Just then, the main doors of the restaurant swung open. A woman in a sharp, impeccably tailored business suit strode in, flanked by 2 large men in dark suits with earpieces. She exuded an aura of calm, lethal competence. Her eyes scanned the scene, landing on the man with the violin. A look of relief washed over her face. "Mr. Pembroke," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "We were worried. You missed your check-in." Pembroke. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Arthur Pembroke, the reclusive, legendary billionaire, the founder and owner of the Pembroke Hospitality Group, one of the largest and most prestigious hotel and restaurant chains in the world, a corporation that owned the Gilded Spoon. Ilara, still halfway to the floor, froze. She stared at the man she had tried to help. The homeless man. Mr. Pembroke. It was impossible. It couldn't be real. Richard Sterling looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His jaw hung open. A strange gurgling sound came from his throat. "No," he croaked, shaking his head in frantic denial. "No, it's a trick. It's a prank. That's not... You can't be..." The woman, who Ilara now understood was his executive or lawyer, gave Sterling a look of pure ice. "I can assure you it is no trick," she said. "I am Genevieve Marks, General Counsel for the Pembroke Group, and this is Arthur Pembroke, our founder, your boss." Sterling's knees buckled, He physically sagged, grabbing onto the hostess stand to keep from collapsing. Sweat beaded on his forehead, plastering his carefully styled hair to his scalp. Mr. Pembroke, sir, he stammered, his voice cracking. I had no idea. I am so sorry. I thought You thought I was what? Pembroke asked, his voice dangerously soft. Poor, insignificant, unworthy of basic human decency? He took a step forward. Sterling flinched back as if he'd been burned. I go out like this once a year, Sterling, Pembroke explained, his voice resonating through the now deathly quiet restaurant. I visit my own establishments, unannounced, to see their true character, to see how my employees, my customers, are treated when they think no one of consequence is watching. He gestured with his violin bow towards Ilara. Tonight I saw the very worst of humanity, he said, his eyes locking with Sterling's, and the very best. He turned his gaze to Ilara, and the hardness in his eyes softened, replaced by a profound gratitude. This young woman, he announced to the entire room, offered me her own meal. She risked her job, her livelihood, to show kindness to a stranger she believed had nothing. She showed more character, more integrity in that single act than you have shown in your entire life. Sterling began to babble, his words tripping over each other in a desperate, pathetic plea. Please, sir, it was a misunderstanding, a terrible mistake. I can fix this. I'm an excellent manager. The numbers prove it. Your numbers are a lie, Ms. Marks interjected smoothly. We've been investigating your excellent management for months. The discrepancies in the accounts are substantial. I believe the district attorney will be very interested in our findings. As if on cue, 2 uniformed police officers entered the restaurant. They moved with a calm purpose, their eyes already locked on Sterling. Sterling's face crumpled in utter defeat. The fight went out of him, replaced by a raw, animal terror. Richard Sterling, one of the officers said, his voice official and final. You are under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was shockingly loud in the silent room. They led him away, a broken, weeping man stripped of his power and his pride in a matter of minutes. The restaurant was still. The diners, who had been recording the confrontation, now slowly lowered their phones, their faces a mixture of shock and shame. Pembroke turned his full attention back to Ilara. She was still frozen, unable to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. Young lady, he said, his voice gentle, please stand up. You do not need to kneel for anyone. He offered her his hand. His hand was calloused, but his grip was firm and warm. She allowed him to help her to her feet, her legs feeling like jelly. What is your name? He asked. Ilara, she managed to say. Ilara Vance. Ilara, he repeated, savoring the name. Well, Ilara, it seems this restaurant is in need of a new manager. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his weathered face. How would you like the job? Ilara stared at him, dumbfounded. Me? Manager? But I'm just a waitress. I don't have any experience. You have the only experience that matters, he said firmly. You have integrity. You have compassion. You have a heart. We can teach you the rest. We can teach you how to read a balance sheet. We cannot teach you how to be a good person. He gestured to Ms. Marks. Genevieve, what was Sterling's salary? $85,000 a year plus bonuses, she replied without hesitation. Pembroke shook his head. Let's make Ms. Vance's starting salary $150,000 a year, he declared. with full medical and dental for her and her family, effective immediately. The entire restaurant gasped. Alara felt lightheaded. $150,000. It was a number so large, so fantastical, she couldn't even comprehend it. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of seeing in her entire life. Tears, the ones she had held back for so long, finally began to fall. They weren't tears of sadness or humiliation. They were tears of overwhelming, unbelievable relief. I don't know what to say, she stammered, wiping her eyes. Say yes, Pembroke said with a chuckle. And then, one of the diners at a nearby table, an older woman, began to clap. It started slowly. Then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted in thunderous applause. It wasn't for Pembroke, it was for her. They were cheering for her. The people who had silently watched her humiliation were now celebrating her vindication. A man who had been filming approached her, his face flushed with shame. Miss, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry. I just sat here. I recorded you. I didn't do anything. Can you forgive me? Alara looked at him and saw not a monster, but just a person who had been afraid, who had followed the crowd. There's nothing to forgive, she said, her voice clear and strong. Just try to be kind tomorrow. The man nodded, his eyes wet. Pembroke was not finished. He turned to Ms. Marks again. Genevieve, he said, I want you to write a check from my personal account for $100,000. Make it out to Alara Vance. If the room had been quiet before, it was now utterly silent. $100,000. A personal check. Now. Ms. Marks simply nodded, pulling a checkbook from her briefcase as if this were a perfectly normal occurrence. She quickly filled it out and handed the pen to Pembroke. He signed it with a flourish and presented it to Alara. Alara stared at the slip of paper in her hand. The number had so many zeros she had to count them twice. This was real. This was happening. Her mother's medical bills, the back rent, the car, food, real food. It was all covered. Everything was going to be okay. The weight that had been crushing her for years, the constant, suffocating pressure of poverty, suddenly lifted. She felt so light she thought she might float away. Thank you, she whispered, the words feeling impossibly small for the magnitude of the gift. Thank you. No, Alara, Pembroke said, his voice full of warmth. Thank you. You reminded me of what's truly important. He then raised his priceless violin. And now, he said, a twinkle in his eye, I believe I owe you a song. He put the bow to the strings, and the most beautiful, haunting melody filled the restaurant. It was a sound of sorrow and hope, of struggle and redemption. It was Alara's story, put to music. And the entire restaurant went silent, listening to the homeless man play. The days that followed were a whirlwind. True to his word, Arthur Pembroke and his team descended upon Alara's life like a host of guardian angels. The morning after the incident, a sleek black car arrived at her apartment building. A driver in a crisp uniform knocked on her door. Miss Vance, Mr. Pembroke sent me. I'm to be your personal driver until your new vehicle is delivered. Her new vehicle. 2 days later, a brand new, reliable sedan was parked in her spot. The keys presented to her in a small velvet box. The old, broken-down car was simply gone. The check for $100,000 cleared without an issue. The first thing Alara did was pay her landlord 3 months' rent in advance. The man, who had been hounding her with eviction notices, was suddenly all smiles and deference. Next, She called the hospital's billing department. "I'd like to pay the outstanding balance for Maria Vance," she said, her voice steady. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ma'am," the clerk said, "there is no balance. An anonymous benefactor paid the entire account in full yesterday. All future treatments have also been prepaid for the next 5 years." Ilara hung up the phone, tears streaming down her face. That afternoon, a fleet of trucks arrived. One was from a high-end furniture store. Men carried in a new sofa, a new dining table, and most importantly, a state-of-the-art adjustable medical bed for her mother. Another truck was from an electronics store, delivering a new television and a new laptop for her to begin her management training. The third truck was from a grocery delivery service. They brought boxes and boxes of fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, and pantry staples. Enough food to last for a year. Her empty shelves were suddenly overflowing with abundance. Amidst all this, Ilara began her new role. Pembroke assigned his best operational manager to personally mentor her. She learned about staffing, ordering, inventory, and customer relations. She was a fast learner, her natural empathy and strong work ethic making her a natural leader. The staff at the Gilded Spoon, who had witnessed her humiliation and vindication, treated her with a profound respect. They worked harder for her than they ever had for Sterling, because they knew she saw them. She knew their struggles. She knew their names. But Pembroke's generosity had one final, breathtaking chapter. A week later, he summoned her to the Pembroke Group's corporate headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper that touched the clouds. She met him in a vast boardroom with a panoramic view of the city. "Ilara," he began, "what happened at the restaurant? It went viral. The story of your kindness has been shared millions of times." He slid a portfolio across the polished mahogany table. "My company has received an outpouring of support. It has become clear to me that we have a responsibility to do more than just serve food. We need to serve the community." She opened the portfolio. The cover page read, "The Vance Initiative. I am establishing a new charitable foundation, seeded with an initial endowment of $10 million, Pembroke explained. Its mission will be to provide housing, job training, and support for the homeless and those facing extreme hardship in this city." He paused, his blue eyes meeting hers. "And I want you to run it, as its executive director." Ilara was speechless. "You would still be the manager of the Gilded Spoon, of course," he added quickly. "But you would also oversee this fund. You would decide where the money goes. You would be the one giving people the second chance that you deserve." A new salary was mentioned, one that made her previous new salary seem small. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the purpose. It was the chance to turn her own pain into a well of hope for others. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with a conviction she never knew she possessed. "Yes, I will do it." Meanwhile, the world closed in on Richard Sterling. The evidence of his embezzlement was overwhelming. He was convicted on all counts. The judge, having heard the story of his cruelty towards Ilara, made an example of him. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His wife filed for divorce. His assets were seized to pay back the company. He lost everything. He went from a man who commanded others to kneel to a man who would spend the next decade and a half as a number in a system, utterly powerless. Justice, sometimes, is not blind. Sometimes, it is poetic. 1 year later. Ilara Vance walked through the dining room of the Gilded Spoon. She was no longer a ghost. She was a presence. She greeted diners with a warm, genuine smile. She knew the names of every single member of her staff, their families, their dreams. The restaurant was more successful than ever, not just for its food, but for its heart. It had become famous for the Alara rule, a policy she implemented with Pembroke's blessing. Anyone who came to the back door, hungry and in need, would be given a hot meal. No questions asked. Her life was transformed. She lived in a comfortable new apartment in a safe building, just 2 floors down from her mother. Maria Vance, with the best medical care, was thriving. The color had returned to her cheeks, the laughter to her eyes. The Vance Initiative had become a beacon of hope in the city. Under Alara's leadership, it had funded 3 new shelters, launched a mobile food bank, and created a job placement program that had helped hundreds of people get back on their feet. She spent her afternoons not just in boardrooms, but in those shelters, listening to people's stories, reminding them that they were not invisible. One crisp autumn evening, as she was leaving the restaurant, she saw a young woman huddled on a bench across the street. She was young, barely out of her teens, clutching a thin backpack. She was crying softly, trying to hide her face from the world. Alara recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same desolation she had once felt, the same fear, the same loneliness. She walked over, her new, comfortable shoes making no sound on the pavement. "Are you okay?" Alara asked gently. The young woman looked up, startled. I missed my bus," she sobbed. "I don't have money for a ticket home. I don't know anyone here. I feel so stupid." Alara sat down beside her. She didn't offer money, not at first. She offered something more valuable. She offered her time. She listened. After the young woman had cried herself out, Alara smiled. "First things first," she said. "You look hungry. My restaurant is right across the street. Let's get you a hot meal." The cycle of kindness. It was a small act, a simple gesture. But Alara knew, better than anyone, that a single act of kindness, a single shared meal, could change a life. It could change the world. Have you ever wondered what power lies in a simple choice? The choice to see the person, not the circumstance. The choice to offer a hand, not a judgment. Alara Vance learned that this choice is the most powerful force on earth. It can topple the arrogant, lift up the broken, and remind us all that dignity is not earned by wealth or status, but is the birthright of every single soul.